Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I've read that you receive a text message at least 5 times a day, which reminds you of your own eventual demise. And I was just wondering why someone who's a young woman would be so fascinated with their own death.
I think it's important to keep in mind that it's going to happen, really. I can think of at least a couple of times when I've been kind of going about my day, maybe kind of caught up in one sort of stressful situation or another. And then receiving that kind of text message actually puts things in a little bit of perspective. So I guess in kind of broad terms, I think reminding ourselves of our own death can actually help us put things in perspective and remind ourselves that maybe that particular meeting or deadline we're worried about isn't the be all and end all.
Well, I understand that your father is Professor Ross Menzies. His field of research is also death anxiety. So I wondered whether death or the interest in death was to some extent a family affair.
It's definitely become a family affair. I don't know if it started out that way. I think I was always kind of had a bit of a morbid fascination as a teenager with anything that was kind of, a bit sort of out there or taboo. And I think I was just interested in it because it seemed like the one kind of guaranteed part of life, but something that people sort of shy away from talking about. And then my dad, Ross, and I were talking about it more and more as I studied psychology more and more, and we started to think about its relevance to psychology and mental health in particular. So I think it was always something I was kind of personally fascinated by. And then obviously over the last few years, it's formed more of a kind of career focus for me.
You focused on it as the term is a transdiagnostic construct. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So a transdiagnostic construct is anything really in mental health, any kind of construct that seems to either pop up across different disorders or something that seems to play a causal role. So something that seems to actually drive and contribute to different mental health conditions. So something like perfectionism would be an example of one transdiagnostic construct. We know that perfectionism plays a role in lots of different mental health problems. And so death anxiety is this particularly interesting one, in my opinion at least, because it's been sort of talked about here and there in the literature for decades, but no one until recently has started to argue that it actually is one of these central underlying factors that might be contributing to all of these different disorders. And the thing that makes transdiagnostic constructs so interesting to psychologists is that what that means is that if we can target this common denominator across these different conditions, it's likely to stop people kind of cycling almost from disorder to disorder. So at the moment, what we know from the data and what you tend to see clinically is that it's not uncommon for someone to have, one disorder in childhood, to get treated for that, but then years down the track in adolescence or in adulthood to develop a different disorder. And so if we know that there are these transdiagnostic constructs that seem to play a role in all of those different disorders they've had, then treating that one construct might stop this person needing to return to treatment years later with a different disorder.
So death anxiety sits as some sort of causal construct, the fear of death, or what's it called, existential terror, the realization that I'm mortal and that eventually I won't be here anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And so far there's a lot of research showing that at least death anxiety seems to be associated with many different conditions. So it seems like the higher your death anxiety is, the higher someone's, or the worse someone's social anxiety is, the worse their OCD is, the worse their depression is, and so on. But in the last couple of years, we've got a few more studies showing that not only is it related to these disorders, but it seems to be actually causing them and driving them. And there's still a lot we need to know about it, but it seems like for at least 4 or 5 different disorders, death anxiety seems to actually be causing them, at least to some extent.
Deep Trouble is produced by Steve Charman in the studios of Main FM, Castlemaine.
The Deep Trouble podcast is presented by Trouble Magazine at troublemag.com. Thanks for listening.